We are in Austin for Consensus with Genzio, and today I'm gathered with Nick Carter from Castle Island.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great to meet you in person.
It's good to meet you in person, and I'm kind of sad that the fight didn't go through, but we're gonna talk about all things crypto and what got you into the industry. I don't know you that well, so I want to start there.
You
Like,
don't know me.
like, how did you end up in this industry?
The first thing I did was I mined Dogecoin when I was in college in 2013. Around the time of the Dogecoin launch, I mined it on my gaming rig. Just because I thought it was interesting. I thought proof of work was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I, over kind of 2014, 15, 16, I just dived more into Bitcoin, learned the principles, dived into Austrian economics and
What were you studying back then?
philosophy.
Okay.
And then I worked as a journalist, actually. And in 2016, I decided that I wanted to spend my career working really in the Bitcoin space because there wasn't a lot else at the time. And there wasn't really an industry at that time. So I went to business school and started a data project called Coin Metrics, basically running nodes, pulling data, cleaning it up, and publishing it for free. And I also, when I was in business school, wrote my master's thesis on governance of crypto asset networks. Through those two things, I got connected with the team at Fidelity in Boston, and I joined a crypto fund that they were starting there at Fidelity.
What year was that?
That was in 2017.
Okay.
And I worked with Matt Walsh, and in 2018, we decided to leave and basically start our own fund. We thought that there was an opportunity at the early stage on the infrastructure side in equity deals in the crypto space, and that was Castle Island. So we raised Castle Island Fund 1, and now we're in our third fund, and we've been at it for 6 or 7 years now. So it was a pretty interesting journey. It's not something that I'd planned for.
Yeah.
And I feel very lucky, especially the people that helped me out along the way. But I'm very happy to be able to invest in my convictions and things that I believe in. Pretty excited about the state of the industry today.
In 2013, I mean, that was incredibly early. I remember, like, I joined in 2017, and it felt that at that time things were like very unsure. It's not something I would, at the time I didn't make it like my career. I was just like getting some exposure. And plus, just when you're a student, you don't think, well, the standard person maybe wouldn't think too much of it as an industry with a future. So I'm interested, like, where was your mind at, like 2013, 14, and so on? Like, what did you see in the space that had so much potential? What was the core thing that drove you?
I've always been interested in monetary history, and I became convinced, actually based on the writings of the folks at the Nakamoto Institute, people like Bitstein and Pierre Rochard. They'd been writing in 2014-15, and I became convinced that Bitcoin would be an asset of consequence and potentially a monetary system that would matter in the future. Although after Mt. Gox collapsed, actually, I stopped paying attention to it for a couple of years, or I lost a little bit of faith in it wasn't even an industry in the asset.
What years were?
Well, 2014-15.
Yeah.
So I sort of paid less attention to it for a while, and then when it's revived and came back, I realized this thing wasn't going away. And I think a lot of people have had cycles like that, whether it's that cycle, the prior one, 2017 and after, 21, 2 and after, where they gain a lot of conviction because it refuses to die. So that was it for me. In 15, 16, I realized, okay, this thing's actually not going anywhere. And it's time to dive in. And kind of like interview for the job you want. The job that I got at Fidelity wasn't a job that existed at all.
Yeah.
A crypto asset analyst. There were maybe 2 people that had done that before me, Spencer Bogart and Chris Berniski. And actually Chris was the one who introduced me to Fidelity. So it was those 2 guys that actually inspired me to try and make that my career, believe it or not, and pursue a research-driven approach to the asset class, which I still do today. I'm still very research-focused.
Did you have to design what this role sort of intakes?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wrote the job description, basically. And I had mentorship from Matt, who was my boss and now my colleague at Castle Island. And luckily at Fidelity, we had a very, not permissive, but very supportive atmosphere. Abby Johnson, the chairman of Fidelity, was very bought in to Bitcoin and later, the broader crypto space. Fidelity had also been experimenting with it since 2014. They mined Bitcoin. They had invested using proprietary capital in crypto funds. They had done experiments in the cafeteria with allowing people to pay in Bitcoin in the cafeteria, which did not go well.
Yeah.
And then they started building the infrastructure for what would become Fidelity Digital Assets. And they also stood up a proprietary crypto investing fund, which is what I joined. So I was very, very lucky because I was young. I was about 25 when I joined, and I was thrown into the deep end, and I was immediately getting called in to present to the leadership on crypto topics, which was completely surreal. Going from being a student one day to talking to the senior leadership about new developments in crypto. So it was a very supportive environment. That was definitely not the case in most of the other large asset managers of the time. Yeah. Whether it's JP Morgan or Goldman or State Street, at that time, they were not supportive. Today, it's a bit different, of course. But that's why I joined Fidelity, because I had seen that they were outwardly pro-crypto, and I wanted to kind of lend my support to that firm.
What was your narrative? Like, you come into this board meeting, what do you say to make sure they understand that this is valuable?
They would have a weekly meeting on crypto topics, and it was kind of like one of the more chilled out meetings that they would have because crypto wasn't the most important thing to the firm initially. And they would cover all kinds of topics. They'd bring in guest speakers as well. Pretty much anyone you could think of that's an important protocol developer has been a guest speaker at Fidelity at some point. So they covered all sorts of topics. One early meeting I remember was I developed a framework for evaluating crypto assets on the basis of whether there were scams or not. And I specifically remember going in on Ripple and asserting that I thought Ripple was total garbage, actually.
How did they react to that?
I think they just nodded politely. Okay. I don't know if I was taking that seriously back then.
Were you ever met with skepticism?
Of course, yeah. Throughout my career, it's been a battle uphill, facing skeptical folks, whether it's in the press, government, academia, my colleagues, my friends that work in traditional finance. I mean, you know how it is. At Fidelity, it was like the very senior leadership was super pro, and the junior staff were super pro crypto. And then the middle, the kind of, like top executives, but not the very top, were skeptical.
Yeah.
So it was like a barbell, and it was our job to try and convince them to go full throttle into crypto. And to their credit, Fidelity did do that, right? Yeah. They have the second largest Bitcoin ETF. They have the spot custody and access and brokerage product. They have, a venture fund called Avon now that's also very active in crypto, and hundreds of staff working on this. And of all the large asset managers, they're on the forefront of this, in my opinion, and that's because they've been investing in it for 10 years. So they did eventually get there, and they are one of the loudest pro-crypto voices on Wall Street, or in their case, in Boston.
Yeah. How long did you stay there?
Short time. I left in May 2018. And it was fortuitous. I mean, in venture, it's all about the vintage. It's all about the year in which you deploy the capital, because valuations go up and down. You want to be aggressive when valuations are depressed. You want to be the guy with capital when there is not an abundance of capital. That was the case in 2018. That was also the case in 2022 with our most recent fund. So I feel very lucky with the market timing. The timing is absolutely essential. You can't control it. If you raise capital, you have to deploy it. But yeah, 2018 was a great time to be initially deploying into crypto.
And can you expand a bit on how the Castle Island idea came together?
Well, there weren't very many venture firms focused on crypto in 2018. I mean, there was Polychain, Pantera, there was Metastable, Blockchain Capital existed, and not a lot else, actually. It's very much unlike the world today where there's probably well over 100 firms that do token or liquid venture or crypto venture. And Matt and I felt that we could help bridge the gap between traditional finance and the crypto ecosystem. And so we deployed and on the venture side as opposed to the token side. I was very, very skeptical of tokens.
Yeah.
I've probably moderated that view somewhat, but I remain fairly skeptical, and maybe some legislation can change the viability of tokens. Maybe something like the FIT Act could change whether the tokens can be legal in our securities framework. But I was very skeptical, and so what we wanted to do was deploy into equity of operating businesses with real business models in crypto.
Mm-hmm.
And all along, over the last 6 or 7 years of us doing this, that's meant deploying into financial infrastructure primarily. So, exchange, custody, brokerage, lending, asset management, key management, data and analytics, prime brokerage, things like that. So that's our bread and butter, is taking functions that we know exist in traditional finance and are good businesses and investing behind those ideas within the crypto space. And that's kind of what we're most known for, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds amazing, but how do you begin to invest? What in your background gave you the confidence? and did it go well from the beginning?
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah. Very familiar.
Kanye West said, "I found bravery in my bravado." Initially, when I was raising the first fund, the $30 million fund, I certainly had imposter syndrome. Or rather, I rightly felt like I was inexperienced. And it was a matter of limited partners taking the bet on us, taking the bet on crypto and on the firm. And to this day, I'm amazed that they did, but obviously grateful. And that ended up being a great fund as well. So I feel like it paid off. But at that time, Matt and I did not have a huge degree of venture experience. I didn't even set out to be a venture capitalist when I started my career.
Yeah.
What we felt was there was a huge opportunity. It was being underexploited, and we thought we could learn the skills to do venture. And in hindsight, it's taken me a very long time to become what I think is an adept venture capitalist. It's something that is skills-based and apprenticeship-based, and it does take a long time to learn the skills of VC. But, the conditions were very ripe for a venture fund to do well in that environment. So even despite a relative inexperience, we thought that the opportunity was so large that we could still prosecute it well. It's like, that anybody can go out and raise a fund. You don't need permission to do it. All you have to do is just go raise capital. But yeah, you basically have to have conviction and guts, and you really have to believe in what you're doing. And in our case, it wasn't just the financial opportunity. We morally and ideologically were aligned with the industry. We thought it'd be a good thing if crypto thrived, became more mature, the infrastructure became more sophisticated. And so it's like Ikigai. Yeah. It's the thing that you're paid to do. It's the thing that you like to do, and it's the thing that you do well. And if those things all intersect, that's an amazing place to have as your career. And certainly I've had my skepticisms about crypto over the years. My enthusiasm has waxed and waned. Mm-hmm. But today I do feel like I have that. And I'm very, very grateful that I get to invest in something where I have high conviction and I think I'm actually making a difference. And of course, there's financial upside.
I definitely align with the Ikigai mindset, yeah. As you look at startups back then, was it easier to find something good or the opposite, just because there was less to look at?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. There were fewer entrepreneurs that were willing to take a bet on crypto. Mm-hmm. because it wasn't as valid or wasn't as mature as an industry. The total addressable market seemed smaller, or they were smaller. And so the few that were willing to do it tended to have high conviction and like really believe in it. And that's kind of what you want in an entrepreneur, someone that has grit and that's not going to give up. So also valuations were much lower because there was much less capital that was focusing on the sector. So that ended up being a good time to invest for sure. But of course, you always have to filter out, themes that don't make sense. Like back in those days, there was a lot of DLT, there were a lot of private blockchains, a lot of enterprise blockchain, if you remember, and all of that ended up being kind of nonsense. But people did deploy hundreds of millions into that, so you still had to have some degree of taste and a sense of where this industry was going and what actually made sense to invest in. So it wasn't like you could throw darts randomly and do well. You still had to have some discretion.
Was there something back then, or like at some point, did you think that something would play out in a certain direction and it went on like completely different?
Oh, yeah. I mean, many, many times. I mean, I thought that Bitcoin would have a much more robust ecosystem of side chains and layer twos. I wrote a blog post in 2018 saying that, for the future of Bitcoin, for Bitcoin to work, there would have to be many, many L2s. And Ethereum really realized that vision. Ethereum has the roll-up centric roadmap. Bitcoin has Lightning, which languished. Lightning, by all accounts, has not been a success. Now, there's Bitcoin Season 2, and people are trying to build L2s on Bitcoin. But I was wrong with the timing there. I also thought crypto trading market infrastructure would become much more integrated into U.S. financial markets than it did. So we invested behind that theme, and what happened instead was the offshore brokerages did very, very well. Like the Binance's, FTX, while it was in operation, right? And so that was one thing we were wrong about. I thought the offshore exchanges would suffer and be marginalized, and the market would become much more legitimate onshore. One thing I was right about was stablecoins. For years and years and years now, I've thought stablecoins would be probably the most important theme in crypto, and I think they are today.
Yeah.
They have the most product market fit by users, and in terms of users doing real economic activity as opposed to just crypto games or gambling. Stablecoins are the number one thing in crypto. So, it's about you can get a lot of things wrong, but it's about getting a few things right and leaning into those things really heavily.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's the expectation now with Bitcoin Season 2?
My expectation, my hope is that we have a year from now, we have fully functioning rollups, whether optimistic or ZK, that settle natively to Bitcoin. And we don't know exactly how we're going to achieve that. It might be BitVM. It might be a new opcode like OpCat. Maybe a zero-knowledge prover opcode for Bitcoin. There's obviously some uncertainty there, but what I would hope to see would be a vibrant set of Bitcoin L2s that allow people to still use Bitcoin, the asset, settle to the Bitcoin blockchain, but create a novel transactional space that allows Bitcoin to interoperate with other blockchains, allows for the creation of a real native DeFi ecosystem on Bitcoin, allows for arbitrary asset issuance like stablecoins on Bitcoin. Because stablecoins started on Bitcoin, that's where Tether was first issued on Omni protocol on kind of the base layer. So these ideas are not new, but I would look to see Bitcoin reach technological parity with networks like Ethereum or Solana. That's what I want to see out of Bitcoin Season 2. We're investing very heavily behind that theme. We've invested in 4 Bitcoin L2s, probably do more Bitcoin DeFi. I'm very excited to see Bitcoin be revitalized as a network that people actually want to use. So I'm very hopeful.
What are some other themes that are exciting you at the moment?
I mean, to me, as I said, stablecoins, I think, are, the breakout winner in crypto. Even if nothing else works in crypto and we just get stablecoins, we still did something very important because they are a restoration of cash in the digital world. And when I say cash, I mean something that you can use privately or reasonably privately with full transactional autonomy. You can transact with whomever you want with no permission. Stablecoins, of course, are not perfectly permissionless, but they're very good, especially relative to the banking system. And they're far more efficient than the correspondent banking system because it's one big flat financial network as opposed to interlocking regional banking systems where you have to go through correspondent banks and you have to settle ultimately all transactions through New York or maybe London, which is a very hierarchical and exclusionary and thus expensive system. So stablecoins are flat, they're egalitarian, there's no single nodes that control everything the way it works with the banks. And we see the success of stablecoins, particularly in emerging markets. You know, we're talking about hundreds of millions of people worldwide that are able to spontaneously convert their local currency into dollars. They're able to earn a yield. They can earn the treasury rate if they want. They can earn a DeFi yield. They can transact peer-to-peer. They can self-custody their assets in a stable form. And of course, people worldwide do have access to dollar banking in some cases, but you still have to trust the banks. So in Argentina, for instance, you know, in 2000, yeah, you could have a dollar liability in a bank, but it wasn't actually backed by dollars. The system collapsed, and anyone that had a dollar claim in a bank was not able to realize that. So, you know, this is a way to get a relationship with a kind of U.S. or offshore issuer of stablecoins that's far more credible in many cases than the local banking system, far more credible than the local monetary system. So I think stablecoins are doing something very important, and we're beginning to see episodes of crypto dollarization, is what I call it, whereby dollar stablecoins threaten local currencies and actually accelerate the decline of local currencies. So this is, you know, well established in the crypto space. Everyone knows that stablecoins are generally good for the use of the dollar, the reach of the dollar globally. But what we are going to see now is even more interesting is extending the dollar, using the dollar to extinguish weaker local currencies. So it's not that crypto is going to kill the dollar. Crypto is going to entrench the dollar, but it's going to kill off, you know, the bottom third of the world's weakest currencies because people won't have a reason to hold those anymore. And they now have the tools to very easily transition out of them.
Yeah. Is there anything missing in DeFi at the moment that if it was in place, it would significantly impact adoption?
I would say one of the holy grails of DeFi is lending, non-fully collateralized lending. So the emergence of real credit in DeFi, like a credit score. So some way to allow pseudonymous users to build up credit and borrow without necessarily engaging in capital inefficient over collateralized lending. So some identity protocol tied to credit. People have been trying that for years. It hasn't really worked. The other thing I would say is just resolving composability issues. As, for instance, Ethereum goes for the more modular or rollups based approach to scaling. You now have a bunch of siloed L2s that don't speak to each other very well, which undoes the value proposition of a blockchain in the first place, which is one big financial network that interoperates where you have composability and atomicity in transactions. And as Ethereum has gone for the more fragmented model, it hurts liquidity and it makes it harder to communicate from rollup to rollup, from L2 to L2. And so in a sense, we've actually gone backwards in terms of what blockchains are good for, because now we have these fragmented pools of liquidity that don't talk to each other. So this is more of an infrastructural thing, but for DeFi to work, you need composability. That's why people are moving towards Solana, for instance, which is more monolithic. So what I would hope to see would be some way to reconcile the sort of roll-up or L2 focused roadmap for scaling that Ethereum and others are pursuing with the composability of DeFi. I think that's a very difficult problem to solve. That's kind of a very old problem. That's the problem we have with actually banking systems that don't talk to each other very well. That's where settlement risk comes from. So yeah, we'll see if that's a tractable problem, whether that can even be solved. But that, I think, is actually the main problem with DeFi.
the Bitcoin ETF took a long time to be approved, and then the ETH ETF came so quickly. What is the next big milestone for crypto?
Well, I mean, from an ETF perspective, I'd be shocked if we saw another one. That's a good question. I think the ETFs were kind of a culmination of when the ETFs were launched. It was bittersweet for me, actually.
Really?
Because I actually wrote a blog post that I didn't publish, which was saying I feel like a lot of my work is done because I've spent the last roughly 10 years, 7 years full-time, as in my career, and 3 years before that informally, trying to use my knowledge of like traditional finance to sort of communicate crypto topics to these people. And when the ETF was approved, the Bitcoin one specifically, I realized, okay, like there's very smart people at BlackRock and Fidelity that are now going to be speaking language of traditional finance, and other asset managers like Bitwise, for instance, that can now communicate why Bitcoin matters to Wall Street or even to retail investors. And I'm not really needed anymore. We don't actually need the crypto advocates anymore because the largest and most sophisticated financial firms on the planet are now aligned. So it's kind of hard actually to look towards the next milestone because I felt like the ETF was actually the end of the beginning. Like Bitcoin has existed for about 15 years as a mature financial asset. It's existed for 6 or 7 years, probably since 2017. And I thought that the ETF was the end of that period of immaturity. And now we're in a period of maturity where it's fully linked to the financial system. Probably the thing I would look to next would be seeing banks and all sorts of payment processors adopt stablecoins as a real settlement mechanism. And we see they're all experimenting with it. Visa is, obviously PayPal is, MasterCard, WorldPay, Nuvei. All of these payment systems are doing experiments with stablecoins, but it's not yet a fully fledged settlement system. Banks in the US still can't really touch stablecoins for regulatory reasons. The financial regulators have tried to discourage them from doing that. So probably for me, the next step would be when a US bank is willing to settle trades or cross-border flows or anything like that in stablecoins. That would be another thing where I would think to myself, okay, a lot of my work is done. I can kind of go on vacation for a little bit now.
There's still a lot to do, but surely everyone in the industry needs a bit of vacation. We since we started, it seems like no one quite really stops. So there's the elections coming up, and obviously, like there's a huge there's a division in opinions on how this is going to impact the industry. Can you comment a bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody likes to say crypto is not a partisan issue, and I agree that it shouldn't be, but it factually is. It's very clear that the politicians in the U.S., I'm limiting my comments to the U.S. here, the politicians in the U.S. that have historically been more friendly to the industry and more supportive of transactional privacy and freedom to transact and self-custody have been more on the conservative side. Of course, there's exceptions, but generally that's been the trend. And there are great Democratic members of Congress that we talk to and interface with that are supportive, but overall, it's the conservatives that have been more friendly to crypto. So I think it's totally not even a matter of debate, which side following the election would be better for crypto. Of course, the Biden admin has responded to pressure in recent weeks, and they have turned around on a few issues, but they're still overwhelmingly hostile to crypto. It's not just one thing, it's dozens and dozens of things over every aspect of financial regulation and law enforcement that has made life for crypto entrepreneurs and users in this country much harder. So I think it's very clear that a Trump presidency, this isn't me weighing in on the merits of that at all, would be better for crypto. Probably a second Biden term would be less bad as well, because I believe that the progressives championed by Elizabeth Warren, that handpicked the key members of Biden's cabinet that have mainly regulated crypto or gone after it, they've lost some power. So the ETH ETF shows that, the overturn of the SEC's SAB 121 rule, the resignation of FDIC Chairman Gruenberg, the passage in the House of the FIT Act, these all show that the progressives that really are anti-crypto have lost some power in Washington. So I don't believe that Biden, again, would allow Elizabeth Warren to pick his cabinet the way she did in the first term, but we don't know. And, I think the political divide is still very clear. Conservatives are generally more pro-crypto. Of course, Trump is now explicitly pro-crypto. He has advisors around him and folks that are part of the campaign, like Vivek Ramaswamy, who are extremely erudite supporters of crypto. So, yeah, look, I think there's a clear partisan trend here. And, if you do work in crypto, it's very clear where you should be putting your capital and your votes to work. I'm not saying that people should be single-issue voters, but there's one party that wants to deprive you of your livelihood, and there's another one that wants to let you do business. So it's very clear to me, at least.
I think there might be a lot of people in the industry that actually relate to you in this feeling like post-ETF, like work is done, like what else is there to do? Plus with the elections coming, like the sentiment, no matter like the result of the elections, I feel like there is room for a potential feeling of, perhaps like a numb feeling, or like emptiness of some sort, because it has always been exciting because there was something to chase and there was something to work for, and you're early and it feels very niche. And once it's out and if you feel like there isn't much else to do, if that ends up affecting a lot of people in the industry, I wonder what would happen, because that's a lack of excitement.
Yeah, I mean, I do think crypto is undergoing, and it has undergone, this process of maturation, which does mean that there's less scope for innovation today. That doesn't mean that there's nothing to do. There's certainly plenty to do. We see high-quality entrepreneurs every single day that are starting businesses in the space. But as it matures and it becomes more folded into the regulated financial apparatus in this country, as the law enforcement agencies become more adept at dealing with scams or, meritless tokens or things like that, there will be less excitement. And that's just a natural process of an industry that goes from completely unregulated cowboy frontier market to more integrated into the financial system and more regulated. So that does mean that for maybe your average retail punter in crypto, there'll be less to do. But for people building financial market infrastructure, ways to use stablecoins more efficiently or building more infrastructures like L2s on Bitcoin, I think there's still plenty to do. But yeah, I do resonate with that feeling of emptiness. And I think that ennui describes a lot of what people are feeling in crypto today. That's just because we went from a frontier market to a much more mature market. And that's a natural process.
I think Naval has this saying, it's something like, and the reason why you play the game is to be free from it. And in a certain way, like perhaps that emptiness is just some sort of freedom for not having to do the work. We're going to have to wrap it up. I could talk with you on this like for hours, honestly. For everyone watching, where can they find you?
On Twitter, Nick__Carter. That's 2 underscores. All of my work is indexed at nickcarter.info.
Nick, thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.